Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Conn Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, like button, subscribe button, you want to find us there. Go to Empire Media, AMPIRE. Know you have a choice for which shows you want to go tune into, so we appreciate you choosing this one. Today, it's Tuesday, August 30th, and I'm going to give you a rundown on Washington's 53-man roster, which has now been set. I'm going to get also into the Brian Robinson situation and go position by position, surprises, not surprise, whatever. But let's start with a couple of things because this is fluid. Washington kept 27 players on offense, 23 on defense. This is going to change. So one thing Ron Rivera stressed was exactly that during his press conference. Keep in mind, the roster does not need to be set for the first game until a week from Wednesday. That's when you really know you've made the roster, when you're on the roster at that time. Because they moved the cuts earlier in the week compared to previous years when it used to be on the Saturday of Labor Day, it gives coaches or teams extra days to then maybe reshape the roster. So it's going to look different next Wednesday than it does right now. Maybe only by a couple spots, but it will look different. For example, Washington kept 5 tight ends with Curtis Hodges as that 5th guy. He hasn't practiced in a while. He's been hurt. So something could happen with him there, maybe putting him on IR after waivers, after in a day or so after others clear waivers. That way, if you do it that way, he can come back this season if you want him to, after the final cuts are made. That's a possibility. You also have the Robinson situation is another way you can open up a roster spot for a defensive guy. So, for example, with Robinson, here's what we know. There was no structural damage in the knee. Ron Rivera confirmed that. And that's where he had some surgery on. And in fact, he was at the facility on Tuesday. The Commander's website has pictures of him on crutches with his right knee, wrapped. And, it's a good sign that he was up and about, that he was here. He was getting checked out by doctors. So what the key is there is what they determine over the next few days as far as his potential recovery, because they're still learning, trying to figure out that timeline. But let's say they get to a point in a couple of days where there's he's going to miss a month or so. Well, then they can put him on that non-football injury list. That opens up a roster spot for somebody else. That's how you then get to maybe getting 25 and 25 or even 26, 24, depending. But it is a way you could get to another roster spot for a defensive player because they only have 4 corners. You need more. You need more depth there. That's where we're at right now. It's a fluid situation. Do not view this as a finished product. There will be a few changes over the next week. It's almost a guarantee because the way the roster is shaped, you're not going to keep 27 on offense, 23 on defense. It's just the initial process for finalizing this roster. But again, next Wednesday at 4 o'clock, that's when you know you're playing in that or that you'll be on the roster for the opener. So again, with Robinson's situation, there's still more to learn. He will be viewed by doctors over the next couple of days to determine the best course of action for his recovery. They are optimistic, as we've all been telling you, about his recovery. And part of that was because the wound was clean. And again, there's no structural damage. It didn't damage any organs or arteries or whatever. So that's all good. And it's why they are optimistic about the recovery. They still don't know when. So until they have a better idea that he's going to stay on this active roster, and it could be that maybe they think he'll be back in 2 or 3 weeks, in which case they don't have to do anything. But it's why they kept Jonathan Williams. And so let's go to each roster spot. Well, quarterback, obviously, there was no surprises there. So let's get to running back and Williams because he becomes that third running back now with Robinson's in situation still in flux. And he'll be behind Gibson and then McKissick. But part of the reason why they kept Williams, and he had a good camp, that's Bram Weinstein's guy. Bram has been whispering in my ear about him for 2 years or a year and a half and how much he likes him. He did have a good summer. And one difference between he and Jared Patterson is that they felt like Rivera even said that he felt like Williams' style was more similar to Robinson's. And the allure of Robinson was that consistent 3, 4, 5 yard, 6 yard guy up the middle between the tackles. That's something with Gibson that he's not going to give you that consistency. He can give you some bigger plays, but that consistency hasn't been there. And so that's why they liked Robinson. It's why they'll keep Williams for now and see where that goes. Gibson obviously will be the number one back. He and McKissick will rotate, and they compare them together. There's still a chance that Gibson will return some kickoffs, but it was more certain when Robinson was going to be that primary running back than it is now. At receiver, they kept 6, not a surprise. The guy that they cut that was on the bubble was Alex Erickson. He would have been a punt returner, but Dax Milne can do it. And it really didn't come down to Dax Milne was always going to be on this roster. They like how he can return punts, but they also like how he runs routes. Maybe clearly one of the best route runners on the roster. They feel like he can run routes from 3 different positions. So he's very consistent there. He was going to make it. So it really didn't come down to which one you keep. They were going to keep Milne. The only question was, would you also keep a 7th? And the answer is no. If Alex Erickson is still out there and they need a punt returner or something, they'll go back out and get him. For now, they're going with 6. By the way, Cam Sims was not out at practice, did not practice today as he's still in the concussion protocol. Offensive line, they kept 9. That was not, in fact, all 9 are the ones that I expected to make it. They cut Wes Martin. They put Keith Ismail on injured reserve. I didn't think his play warranted him earning a spot on the 53. So I think it'll be good for him to stick around and see if he can develop from a power standpoint, because that's one thing they wanted to see more from him. Rookie Chris Paul made it. Listen, Chris Paul earned that spot. He was a solid pick. You can still say there's some rawness to his game, still more to learn. But what you did see is a guy that had tools to work with. He's a good athlete, and he had some strength, and you saw that in games. I also like that the way he finished blocks at times in games were a little bit of an attitude. So I think that was a good thing for him, but it's a good thing for them that he's not making it just because he's one of their draft picks. He made it because he did earn it. And they have a need inside a guard for some depth. That helps too. Again, tight end, they kept 5. Hodges injured again. I think they're going to do something with him at some point, because I don't see them keeping 5, not when you only have 23 defensive players and you have holes or you need depth at other spots. Armani Rogers was the big one who, at the start of camp, you would not have said, both he and Hodges will make it. Although, if you remember when I had Donnie Warren on, their former scout, obviously the former great tight end here, and he was excited about that room, and he basically listed all 5 of these guys. The key here will be who's going to be there for the opener. Logan Thomas was practicing today. Cole Turner and John Bates both practiced for a second day in a row. Those are all good signs. And then again, you have Rogers. It's good to have those 3 back, because then it allows Rogers to develop at a more natural pace. He looked good this summer. He certainly looks like a guy you wanted to keep around to develop. But when you get to the season, things change. And now it's going to be good for them to have 2 experienced tight ends if both Bates and Thomas are able to go. And you know that you have something pretty solid in Cole Turner as well. There was stuff he's going to miss from having been out for about 3 weeks, but he's still a quality prospect, Cole Turner is. And I think he's going to help them, even though he did miss that time. So, but again, it gives Rodgers a chance to perhaps develop away from the pressure of having to produce at a certain level right away.
The wait is almost over. A new football season is about to begin. Get ready for the NFL Week 1 action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. To celebrate the return of football, DraftKings is giving new customers a can't-miss offer. Bet just $5 on any football game and get $200 in free bets instantly. Want more action for opening night? Everyone can experience the thrill of DraftKings early win promotion. Get up 7, you win. Bet on any NFL team of your choice, and if your team leads by 7 points at any point during the game, you get paid instantly, even if your team loses. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code KEIM to get $200 in free bets instantly when you place a $5 bet on any football game. That's code KEIM, K-E-I-M. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older, Virginia only. Bonus issued as free bets. 1 early win token issued at opt-in. Moneyline bets only. Deposit and wagering restrictions apply. Eligibility and terms at DraftKings.com/football terms. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call the Virginia Problem Gambling Helpline at 888-532-3500.
Defensive line, they kept 9. Again, the tough one was William Bradley King. They let him go. The 9 they kept, have talked about Shaka Tony for a while and just how he can make some moves that others can't. Last year, he made the roster because of a move he made in the preseason finale. This time, he made a move against the Chiefs where just he ducks the corner around the right side, and you didn't see a lot of guys doing that here. Then also the key, and Rivera talked about it, and I pointed this out in the past, was his play on special teams. He did make some plays on special teams. One punt coverage where he got down pretty quick, makes a nice open field tackle. Those are the kind of things that can separate you when you're trying to win a roster spot. I think they want to see how Tony matures as a pro. So that's why you guy with that kind of ability to turn the corner, you're going to keep them around until you're convinced that they're not going to develop anymore. That's why he's here. It still was hard for them to cut William Bradley King, but Tony's got the higher ceiling because of that. And if Bradley King is still out there in a day or so, I would be stunned if they didn't bring him back on practice squad. Linebacker. This was one of the mild surprises where they cut Khalid Hudson. Now, his play certainly did not warrant a guaranteed roster spot. I thought there was some holes there. Wasn't sure how much he had developed from one year to the next. And I think some other guys flashed a little bit more. And so he's gone, but they kept Milo Eiffler and Dejon Harris. Harris I liked based on what I saw from him late in the preseason. And I felt like he had a solid game against the Ravens, very active, was lined up with the first unit next to Jamin Davis. We talked about that the other day. But he also did a nice job. He had one play in particular where I remember him taking on a block, shedding the block, and then going in and getting in on the tackle. Just a nice play. And that's the kind of guy that you want to keep around, develop. And I also think the other thing that helped them turn away from Hudson and then keep a guy like Harris is because of how Milo Eiffler played. Fast guy going into camp, did not have him on the 53-man roster because I don't think they thought he was going to elevate his game to that level. They knew he was fast, but was he just a straight line speed guy? Well, that was kind of the word going in. Well, he showed more this summer, and I think he showed more sideline to sideline. And it's funny because we talked to Cole Holcomb today, and he called Eiffler a freak because he said because of the speed and because he said he's watched him squat 500 pounds. And, so he's got that strength too. So a guy, when you have that speed, worth developing. I think that's why you go and keep a guy like that. He and Hudson were on these special teams, coverage units. So you want to keep one of those guys for that because they both can run. But Eifler's a guy that they're going to try and develop there. Wouldn't shock me if they go out and get another linebacker, but not a guarantee. But they do have the 5 there with David Mayo as the primary backup, and then Cole Holcomb and Jamin Davis. But Eifler makes it because of speed, and Harris made it because he showed late in the preseason especially. Cornerback, only 4. Surprise. The cuts there, Danny Johnson, Corn Elder. I'm not shocked that one of them got cut. I'm surprised that both of them were cut. But that tells me, again, that they know they have to improve their depth there. There's no way you can go in there with 4, knowing that St. Juste has had some injury issues in the past, knowing that Christian Holmes is a rookie. Those are your 2 primary backups to William Jackson and Kendall Fuller. With Holmes, one of the things that Kendall Fuller talked about was just his preparation and how inquisitive he is. Always a good sign, I think, for any defensive player. And I like the fact that his locker is next to Kendall Fuller's in the locker room. That's a good guy for him to be around because nobody prepares. I don't think anybody prepares as well as Fuller does. And one of the things he talked about with Holmes was exactly that, his preparation, the questions he asked him in meetings, etc. That's all good stuff for his future. Now, wasn't sure, I felt like he had a strong start to the summer. Wasn't sure how he progressed, if it would be enough to win a roster spot, but it was. And I think, again, I do think they're going to look for more help at corner. They have to. Again, only 4. That's rare. Safety, 5. No surprises there. The one that should be congratulated is Jeremy Reeves. Because, and I'm going to point out him and Jonathan Williams, because they both traveled these tough journeys to get to this point. Williams, this is his 7th franchise. Now, he's been with Washington 2 different times, but this is he's played with 7 franchises since coming to the league in 2016. So for him to make that 53, it's a huge deal for him. And so kudos to a guy like that for sticking it out. And the same can be said for Jeremy Reeves. He's been with Washington since 2018, after he was cut by the Eagles that summer. He has never made a 53-man roster out of training camp. So, but he earned it. And this is, you saw, I've always liked this kid because I always felt like he played tough and he was smart. His big issue has been size. So he had to play not only tougher, but smarter. That's a hard thing to do. But you could see the comfort level that he has in this defense and in himself based on the way he played. He showed up this summer and he earned a roster spot. The one guy that I wasn't sure about was Stephen Parker. They cut him on Monday night. Wasn't shocked by it, but he was a guy that I know opened their eyes. Could come back on the practice squad if he's still out there in a day. But he's physical, but I think the hard part for him is you had Cam Curl, you had Derek Forrest, you didn't necessarily need another guy like that. You have Percy Butler, so they already had guys who could do what he did. So that would be a reason there, but otherwise, no real surprises at that point. They kept all 8 of their draft picks. Again, when you look individually, not a shock because I think you're clearly going to keep Jahan Dotson. Of course, he's going to be very good. Mathis, of course, Brian Robinson, of course, Butler, Chris Paul played his way on there. I think Christian Holmes was one I wondered about because I think that's the one where you know that they need to get depth. They had some veterans there, but if all things being equal, you're going to go with the young guy who you drafted, who's a bigger guy. It makes sense. So that's where we're at with the roster. Again, it's a fluid situation. Do not view this as a finished product. Because there will be changes over the next week. One other thing I wanted to mention today, and this is something Kendall Fuller talked about, Holcomb also talked about it, and it's why these guys remain optimistic about their defense. Despite what was shown during the preseason, I think they all kind of said, used the word vanilla. Every team is pretty much vanilla during the preseason. You can still play at a certain level, right? You don't have to. No team is showing a ton of what they can do. But the reason why these guys remain encouraged is in part because of what they hear in practice, and that comes from the communication. Fuller and Holcomb would say that you didn't hear a lot of it 2 years ago. It was a new defense, and it wasn't so much that guys didn't know what to do, it's where they weren't always confident in what they should be doing. And when you're not confident in what you should be doing, you're not necessarily relaying what you're seeing to someone else on the field. Now you heard that a lot this summer. Now it's got to show up. I can talk about this ad infinitum because we've heard it all summer. But you got to show up on the field on third downs and get off the field. That's when we'll know that things have really changed. But one reason why they're confident going or feel good about this defense going into the season is because of what they heard in practice this summer. So there you go. That's it for practice report and a rundown on the 53-man roster. I'll be back on Thursday with former Washington tight end Rick Doc Walker, always a passionate guest. I'll talk to you next time.